I'm Tracey Masella, a licensed clinical social worker for the Adolescent Transitional Living Program at Silver Hill Hospital in New Canaan. Welcome to Straight Talk with Tracey, a Silver Hill Hospital production. Each month, we discuss mental health issues with experts, answering your questions and getting the conversation going on mental health and addiction. This month, I'm joined by Dr. Erin Krasner, an assistant professor of clinical psychiatry at Yale School of Medicine and a practicing psychiatrist in Wilton, Connecticut. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you, Tracey, for having me.
Today, we're going to be talking about communicating with your teen.
Aha.
We know that this is a minefield,
It
right?
is.
We've spent a lot of time working with families in the past, talking to them about how to talk to their teen. What are some of the hurdles? What are the potholes, right? So we describe it as roller coasters and Ferris wheels. It goes round and round and round, and it goes up and down, right?
Those are great descriptions.
So what are some of the things that catch people up, catch parents up, get them into these conflicts that they can't get out of?
Control.
On whose part?
Everybody's.
Everybody wants control.
Everybody wants control.
What does control mean when you're talking about communicating with your teen?
Well, there's a lot about your kids that makes you want to control them. In most cases, you want to control the environment so that they can be successful.
And that's not a bad thing.
No, it's a very human thing. You want to protect your kids. You want control also because you want to maintain a mantle of authority as a parent. You want control because in many cases you think and or you do know better. And seeking control can be life-saving when your kid is spinning out of control. Seeking and maintaining control when you're trying to communicate with your kids can be interrupting of a evolution in your relationship with your child.
Right. So we talked in our last episode, when you joined us last month, we talked about the natural developmental cycle of adolescents moving away from parents, separating and individuating from parents as being both natural and desired, right? So therefore communication has to change. It has to move from a more authoritarian style of communication when kids are little to a more, what would you say? What would be the adjective you would use to describe what communication between a teen and a parent should look like?
Reciprocal.
Reciprocal.
More reciprocal, because more than anything else, teens want to feel like the author of their own novel, and they don't want to feel over-controlled. And I don't even know if that's just teens. I'm thinking of my 11 and 9-year-old kids, and the more independence I'm able to grant them, the more authentic communication I get. Obviously, it's art, not science. But we all want to feel like we're progressing. We all want to feel like we have increasing levels of responsibility and authority and autonomy and able to be the authors of our own stories.
Right.
So when parents are in an over-control mind frame,
Those teachable moments, right? Always seeking those teachable moments.
when it's super didactic and it's not reciprocal and flowing, then teens smell that and move away from it instinctively. Now, part of that is normative. And there are certain topics that are less appropriate to talk about with your parents. And there are on the other side, there are certain parents who are overly solicitous of communication that might be inappropriate with kids. When parents are overly dependent on their kids for friendship or collegiality, that can be over-parentifying for the child, right, and stress them out. So I'm thinking of like relationship problems between mom and dad, and dad pulls Jimmy aside and says, "Oh,
your mother,
your mother,
yeah,
you'll never believe what
yeah,
she did."
Yeah, yeah.
That's a problem.
Yeah,
because
yeah. What's a kid supposed to do with that information?
Exactly. It's triangulating. It puts them in the middle,
right,
and it's ultimately confusing because the kid will want to play ball. The kid will want to be the ear for the parent.
Right.
But
that's a very seductive thing to be in that, equal role, right, with the adult. But it's power that is not ultimately warranted.
Well, the problem with it is it erodes the mantle of authority that the parent may at some point need.
Right. Exactly.
So communicating with teens is about self-reflection as a parent. Is this a topic that is a TMI topic? Is this a topic that is overly, intimate for the teen? So thinking about oneself and thinking about your kid and his or her capacity is a really important task for parents when they're communicating with their teens. And teens typically want to talk to their parents. They want to have some level of discourse, even around difficult topics. And if it's handled well by parents, it can be that kind of safe harbor for kids to feel attached to an adult figure who cares deeply for them and is not going to abuse the trust. But that's hard to do.
Yeah, it's very hard to do.
It's very hard to do.
Right. So a lot of things popping in my head right now. One is you talked last time about being an empathic ear. How can a parent be empathic to a kid who seems to be moving away from the family, developing a different value system, hanging out with kids that parents might not think are the best for them as they experiment with different, things in their life? I mean, how do you remain empathic when you're inside screaming and afraid?
Well, why don't we do a little role play?
All right.
You be the kid.
Okay.
And I'll be the dad.
Okay.
And I'll try to model what a validating empathic stance might be.
Okay.
Okay, let's just imagine that it's an evening where you are in a fight with a friend within your friend group, and you're obviously irritated or irritable, and I'm concerned. Let's just imagine that scenario.
I'm going to turn away from you.
Oh, right. Well,
if I had a phone, I would be using my phone. So.
Tracey, I wanted to grab you for a minute to talk to you a little bit about what. Trace, I'm worried. I've seen.
What? There's nothing wrong. Just go away.
Okay, I hear you. I see that you're upset or not upset.
I'm not upset. I'm fine. It's just there's just some stuff going on. It's fine. I can handle it.
Okay. Well, I know you can handle it because you handle so many things, and we've seen you handle problems here and problems with your friends time and again. But I really want to be a resource to you, and I understand this is not the right moment.
You're not going to understand, Dad. You're not going to get it. It's like not something that you're even going to understand what's going on.
Yeah. No, I think you're probably right.
I mean, you don't even know how to use Snapchat. I mean, come on.
Well, that's for sure. I would kind of like to know, but I don't want to tread on your territory. And I see you're upset, and I love you, and I want to be there for you. But obviously, this isn't the right time. When you may not know right now, but when would be a reasonable time when we could talk just for a few minutes about this? Could be later, to tomorrow, next week? I don't care.
I don't know. I mean, I guess we could talk now if you want.
Well, all I want is to support you, really. And if I can be a soundboard for you, then I really would like to do that.
Okay.
Okay, so what we just did was you saw me listen empathically. You saw me adopt a caring, neutral, respectful stance. You saw me put the ball in your court when it's time, when an appropriate time would be to communicate. I tried to convey love without control.
Mm-hmm.
I gave a little bit of respect to you, citing multiple previous times when you've been effective. And I tried to elicit a more, I kept my paternal role. I didn't give that up because I don't want to give that up. But I also didn't kind of strong-arm you into communicating on my terms.
Right.
But I wanted to ask you, how did it feel to talk to me when I was in that role play?
Well, your tone was what I noticed. Was you stayed calm, gentle, and extremely non-forceful, right? So if it happened, it happened. If it didn't, it didn't. Simply the message was, I'm here for you. I see you might be going through something tough. If you want to talk, I can listen. I think that, for me, is the key with parents is that they move too quickly into, I want to problem solve. So it gives the message that whatever the kid is feeling is uncomfortable for the parent. And I want you to stop. And it doesn't seem like you can stop it, so I'm going to come in and rescue you, right? So they put on their super parent cape and they dive in. You were not forceful in saying, tell me what's going on. I know something's going on. What's going on? Who are you talking to on your phone, right? Going into that detective mode to try and find out information so that they can then use that to problem solve for the kid. It was all about, hey, can I help you tolerate this moment? Because it looks like it's kind of a tough moment for you. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk with Dr. Krasner about setting limits and building a family frame.
For 1 in 4 Americans, mental illness hits close to home. And since 1931, Silver Hill Hospital has also been close to home. For individuals and families facing the challenges of mental illness, Silver Hill offers a highly trained, compassionate staff that provides state-of-the-art care in a beautiful and private setting. If mental health issues hit close to home, remember, there's a world-class psychiatric hospital right in the neighborhood.
Welcome back to Straight Talk with Tracey. I'm here with Dr. Aaron Krasner, and we're talking about communicating with teens, the roller coasters and Ferris wheels. So now we're going to talk a little bit about setting limits. This is a big hot topic with parents. How do you do it? How do you do it effectively? And how do you maintain them?
Limit setting is so hard. Mm-hmm. I'm going to tell you all the reasons why it's hard.
Okay.
It's hard because parents don't agree about what limits to set and how. It's hard because it may be hard for parents to set limits for themselves. It's hard because there are stressors in life that make limit setting with kids even harder. It's hard because kids don't like limits and push back. It's hard because the iterative process of setting limits requires discipline and consistency. It's hard because sometimes parents don't know whether setting the limit is helpful or hurtful. So there are so many reasons why limit setting is the most treacherous part of parenting. And my best advice around limit setting is to keep at it. Keep at it in terms of your dialogue with your spouse, your significant other. Keep at it in terms of transparently relaying why you're setting limits with your kids. Keep at it in terms of trying to stay consistent. And keep at it because unfortunately the world is full of limits. And the more you can introduce the concept of limits to kids early and often, the more they will be able to manage limits when they're set in society,
Right.
at work, at school, on teams, etc. When we're overly indulgent and we don't set limits as parents, it reflects more often than not our own needs.
Needs for what? As a parent.
Needs for gratifying our children's wishes. Sometimes that's born out of guilt. I, as a child, some parents tell me, had such strict limits imposed upon me, it engendered so much contempt that I refused to do that with my kids. And then there's a swing in the pendulum way to the other end of the spectrum. Conversely, some parents just set limits because that's how it was done for them and manage it.
Right. Look how I turned out.
Right. And either extreme is a problem.
Right.
What is only possible is a meaningful dialogue about limits with all parties involved. And everyone has their strengths and weaknesses when it comes to limit setting. Some families, one parent is the heavy, and the other is the Disney mom or the Disney dad. Some parents are able to share that responsibility. Single parents have it even harder, where they have to be the Disney
Both.
mom and the Disney
Right.
dad. And limit setting becomes all the more challenging in those contexts. The consequences of overly authoritarian limit setting are alienation from your parent, your child.
Right.
And the consequence for overly indulgent parenting is a progressive erosion of the mantle of parental authority and an over-parentification of the child such that the child feels that he or she has free reign to do what it is that he or she wants to do. And then when confronted by limits in society is absolutely shocked and appalled.
Right. And you can't blame them.
Right.
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 It's not their fault. Right.
Right.
So I find that parents are truly uncomfortable with a child's distress. And that starts very, very early on. So when a child is expressing distress, the caregiver will go, the mom, the dad, the caregiver will go and intervene with the child, right? And try and make it so that that distress goes away. When a child is not in distress, that's when a parent or a caregiver will move away from the child and say, whoa, they're being so self-sufficient and so happy. And we need to kind of shift that paradigm and say, oh, you're behaving in a way that is effective. I'm going to come and spend time with you then. And then when you're in distress, what is age-appropriate distress, let you manage that and maybe pull away a little bit. So building that belief in the child that though they may feel uncomfortable and distressed, they can manage it on their own. They don't need me to intervene.
Well, you're of course right, and of course you're talking about reinforcement.
Right.
And when we intervene because we're uncomfortable with our child's distress, we're treating ourselves.
That's right.
And we're not helping the child to learn how to manage frustration.
Right.
And tolerate distress.
Right.
And when we leave the child who's doing well on a screen or whatever, we are reinforcing something else.
Right.
And parenting is the hardest and lowest paid job
That's right. That's right.
ever.
That's right.
Being a full-time parent and staying home is way harder than going to work.
Mm-hmm.
And finding all those minute-by-minute iterative ways to manage expectations and set limits and stick to limits is such a discipline.
Mm-hmm.
It's so hard to do.
How would a parent get started? I've heard you talk before about building a frame, right? So rules, regulations, policies, and procedures for a family. How does a family get started on that? I mean, that seems like a daunting task.
It sure is. And in particular, it's a daunting task with all of the schedules and the obligations and financial pressures. And it's just why we all don't have a Nanny McPhee, I don't know. But we don't.
We don't.
So I guess you and I are the Nanny McPhees for the moment.
That's it, exactly. They can run this in a continual loop.
Well, you set out a frame. I mean, you said rules, policies, regulations and procedures. What's the policy for the morning?
Right.
How are we going to get to school? What happens if you miss the bus? What are the consequences for missing the bus? What happens in the afternoon? When is homework done? Do you have to check the homework? What about dinner? Do we all eat together? Mm-hmm. Jimmy wants this, Jenny wants that for dinner. Are we making 2 dinners? Mm-hmm. What about bedtime? So I think a great way to get started is to take pen and paper and write up what it would look like. Think about it a little bit like a business. Mm-hmm. And think about running your family like a business, and what are the expectations for everybody, and what are the repercussions for failing to meet expectations. Mm-hmm. Because if you or I fail to meet certain professional expectations, then there are dire consequences for them.
Right.
And we have to teach our kids that there are consequences for their behavior. I am told more and more by some of the patients who I treat who are bosses that the kids entering the workforce now are shocked and appalled that there are consequences for behavior.
Right.
And that reflects a more permissive parenting style that I think has abounded among the boomers. And it has impacted, I think, our GDP. So this is not...
this is a global emergency.
Well, it's certainly a relevant
So this
topic.
has become a public service announcement, right?
It's a relevant topic. Running your family in a seamless way sets people up to be effective.
And successful.
Right.
Right.
And not necessarily to make a gajillion dollars and to, be a celebrity, which apparently is important in society, but to be a responsible citizen who has a sense of internal moral compass and a sense of accountability and a willingness to accept no.
Right. I want to cover one more topic, but we're going to take a quick break before we do that. We're going to come back and we're going to talk a little bit about technology.
Okay.
For 1 in 4 Americans, mental illness hits close to home. And since 1931, Silver Hill Hospital has also been close to home. For individuals and families facing the challenges of mental illness, Silver Hill offers a highly trained, compassionate staff that provides state-of-the-art care in a beautiful and private setting. If mental health issues hit close to home, remember, there's a world-class psychiatric hospital right in the neighborhood.
We're back, and I'm here with Dr. Aaron Krasner, and we are talking about communicating with your teen, a big topic.
Yep.
Thanks for being with us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So we are going to talk now about technology. Have you heard about technology?
I have. I can't say I'm an expert, but I have heard of it, and certainly our teens have heard of it.
That's right. If I had a 10-year-old in your chair, I could say I had an expert.
That's right.
Yes, right. So this is something that we hear about all the time when you're dealing with parents and teens, when
Yep.
you're dealing with families that have teenagers and even younger kids now too.
Yeah.
How much is too much? My kid's on the phone all the time. I can't get my kid away from the phone. My kid will never put the phone down. What's it doing to their brain, et cetera, et cetera. This is a huge area of concern for parents, not so much for teens.
Well, let's start with what it does to the brain.
Right.
There is a growing field that is looking at the impact of technology on the developing brain as early as 6 to 12 months, because infants are using iPads.
Right.
And whereas they used to maybe use blocks or whatever, they're building things in the virtual space.
Right. So this has now become a learned behavior.
That's right.
Yeah, at a very early age.
That's right. Swiping left, swiping right. We don't know what the impact of screens are on kids. We are beginning to get an inkling about screen time in latency age, like 6 to 12, and screen time for teens, that the average screen time has rapidly increased over the last 10 to 15 years. Screen time is a worry because there is a sharp decrease in interpersonal connectedness. Because you are on a screen. Now, okay, you're on Snapchat, but you're still on a screen. So what that does to our capacity to interact as people is really unknown.
So I had a princess phone in my bedroom, right?
Yeah.
And I would stay on my princess phone for hours and hours. How is it different, my kid would say, being on his cell phone for hours and hours versus talking on an old-fashioned telephone talking?
Well, I don't know, and no one knows. But there are many more parts of the brain that are stimulated by screens than simply the language centers that are stimulated when you're talking on the phone.
And that stimulation is negative?
I don't know. I think it may be both. I would imagine that it's both negative and positive. Hand-eye coordination is increasingly important for the kinds of jobs that are available in the future. Artificial intelligence is a whole thing. I mean, we're at the beginning here. But what certainly is an issue for teens is the relentless 24-hour news cycle that has become their social lives. So whereas interactions used to be circumscribed, either on the phone with one person at a time on your princess phone.
That's right.
Or
in person,
delimited to school time.
Right.
Or extracurricular activities. You have group chats. You have Instagrams, fake Instagrams. You have Tumblr accounts. You have the internet with its vast expanse of, again, is the internet good or bad? Well, it's a thing.
We're on it.
It's not nor one nor the other.
Right.
So you get back to kind of parenting 101, which is how to remain engaged with your teen on technology. You can't wish it away. The steak cannot be uncooked.
Right.
And you can't say, throw that phone in the toilet. First of all, these phones now survive toilets. Second of all, everybody's on a phone and a computer because all the work's on phone and computers,
Right.
all the schoolwork. So it's intertwined and it has become a part of our lives. And I think to hope and pray that it would go away is just, sort of futile.
So when you say get engaged, remain engaged with your child on technology, does that mean that you should be on their Twitter account, on their Instagram, on their Facebook?
Well, I think it's a very personal family decision. And it depends on what's going on with your kid. If there is evidence that there are problems, then you want to be involved. you want the password for the phone. And it's your phone, you're paying the bills for it. And you retain the right to, interrogate the phone and see what's going on. Now, you don't want to abuse that, because then people will go underground, and they'll have double finstas, secret double, triple probation finstas. And you want to be charitable in how you interact with them, but you also want to, again, bear the mantle of parental authority, because there are people out there who would otherwise take advantage of your kid, and the anonymity of the internet and technology makes that really scary. So do you follow the accounts? Maybe. What about texting with your kid? Do you text with your kid?
I do.
Of course you do.
All the time.
Now, if you send your kid a text, what's the expectation in terms of a response?
Oh, well, that's a loaded question. Yeah. Pretty quickly.
Well, you'd like it to be quickly, but
Right.
it should be established what it is.
That's right.
So is it 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes? And again, these situations are cultivated in an iterative fashion over time.
With communication.
With communication.
So this is part of setting the frame, right?
Absolutely.
So weaving technology into the family communication, right? So this is our expectation. It might not be the expectation of our next door neighbor or your best friend. This is our expectation.
And this works for us.
This works for us.
So when you go out and you change locations from one to another house, I want a text.
Right.
Some parents do that.
Right.
When you go out, I want to hear from you every 15 minutes. That would be maybe a little onerous.
Right.
That would then hew towards the over-control, authoritative
Right.
parenting role. So I think technology is here to stay. I think special empathy is required for our kids who are vulnerable, who are potentially being bullied in the cyber domain. It's not like it was where there was a yucky kid at school who gave you a hard time, but you'd run home and it was scary, but it didn't ruin your life. You can ruin someone with technology. You can spread lies and rumors. You can, unfortunately, some kids are into sexting, sending pictures of intimate pictures to each other, and that's a whole other discussion. But the second that happens, your teen is put him or herself in such a compromised position. And the kids don't understand the permanence of the internet and the traceability of these things. And they'd like to think that Snapchat really goes away. I don't frankly believe that anything goes away. When you post something, it's there.
Right.
So this is a wonderful opportunity to teach your kids how to be responsible consumers of technology and the internet, and what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. So instead of looking at it as an insurmountable hurdle, I think weaving it into the frame and using it as an opportunity to be in the trenches with your kid is the way to go.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being with us and talking about this huge topic of communication with teens.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
I look forward to seeing you next month on Straight Talk with Tracey.